everyone. I'm Dr. Pavan. I'm a consultant medical oncologist. I think I'm audible to everyone. I'm a consultant medical oncologist in Basavadarakam, who deals with most of the hematolymphoid malignancies. So I'll be dealing with management of high-risk CLL and special interest in the acalabrutinib. So definition of high-risk ALS has evolved a lot with the new entities coming to picture. Now with the gene mutations, the two important mutations what we see is P53. So P53 mutation is definitely, a mutated P53 is unfavorable, and IGH unmutated is again unfavorable. And in the FISH, what we usually look into, the unfavorable are deletion 11q and 17p, which actually are correlated, the P53 and 17p. And the trisomy 12 and normal cytogenetics to be neutral, and favorable is deletion 13q. And karyotype, more than 3 unrelated chromosome abnormalities, more than one cycle of karyotype is again high risk. And the importance of high risk evolved with the new trials coming into picture and analyzing the data, where they noticed people with 17p and 11q deletion, the median OS is almost this 11q deletion, median OS is half of what is the regular or a good risk, that is the deletion 13q, and 17p is half of 11q. So that is only 25% of the good risk. So as things evolve, the 17p and 11q remain the unfavorable. And there is a difference between P53 mutation and deletion. Deletion is used 17p deletion technically, and mutation. Sometimes when we see FISH and FISH is not showing 17p deletion, there can be a 3% chance difference, like there can be a P53 mutation, but there is no deletion. So P53 alteration, any alteration tends to do bad, and people with deletion and mutation tend to bad compared to the single names. That's the usual monomer we are looking at. And people with CLL and having a IGH unmutated wing tend to do poorly compared to people who have IGH mutation status. Taking all this into picture, now CLL, there's a CLL International Prognostic Score where they take into 5 things into account: age, stage, beta-2 microglobulin, IGH, mutation status, and P53. So 11q doesn't find any importance here, but IGH and P53 really makes a sense. And people who are high risk and very high risk actually define the treatment plan. And people high risk still we can treat, except for patient asymptomatic. Asymptomatic patients still though doesn't require any treatment. The usual question everybody asks: patient is asymptomatic, upfront CLL, is it worth to do all the mutation panel or FISH panel to get CLL? Actually doesn't require, but patients who already have a panel done and we notice that they have high risk mutation, is it really required to treat them? Still the data says not required. Patient asymptomatic need not to get treated, but there are high chance that they may end up getting treated early than people who are not high risk. And very high risk technically needs to be treated. With the new data available, they don't respond very well to cytotoxic or immunochemotherapy, and these people need a targeted therapy or a BTK inhibitor or the newer drugs which are coming into picture. Now, to start, before going to acalabrutinib, what all things have evolved over the period? So this is an alliance trial where they compared the first time using of ibrutinib in a treatment-naive CLL, wherever they required CLL, and initial trial always compared with rituximab, bendamustine. Ibrutinib was also added. There was one of the arm where rituximab, ibrutinib were combined together. So you can see here in the patients with 17p deletion, wherever the ibrutinib was added, both rituximab or without rituximab, they tend to do a lot better than people who didn't get ibrutinib. This is a chemo arm. And 11q deletion, the same picture. Maybe single agent ibrutinib did slightly better, and people who don't have any of the high risk mutations again did better. And with or without rituximab, they had the same thing. So the whole thing is clear is high risk mutations. The PF is definitely better when you're adding ibrutinib. But with no mutations, also it's better, but not as conspicuous as the people with a high use mutation. Even IGH mutation, people who had unmutated, the addition of ibrutinib did better than non-ibrutinib, and ibrutinib rituximab compared to ibrutinib did slightly better. But there was no difference in the mutated IGH because being a low risk always does the same. Now, this same thing, the next trial was Illuminate, where they combine same using in a treatment naive CLL. There, the combination of ibrutinib obinutuzumab versus chlorambucil obinutuzumab. It's very clear. I think anybody can make the difference. There was no addition of 17p deletion patients here, and it's very clear addition of ibrutinib to obinutuzumab did better than chlorambucil. And one thing people have to notice, right? Whenever obinutuzumab was added, so that previous trial, what we saw, Alliance trial, the combination of ibrutinib, rituximab versus ibrutinib and Arbenda, ibrutinib alone is enough compared. There is no addition of rituximab. That's the period. But obinutuzumab is slightly different from rituximab. The thing is, obinutuzumab is the only drug, is one of the only drugs in CLL where they actually put MRD as importance. Like people who take obinutuzumab, there's a chance of patient ending up to minimal residual disease. But using a TKI, never a patient can achieve a minimal residual disease. And it's always a partial response and they have to take a lifelong treatment. But obinutuzumab and probably venetoclax subsequently and other chemotherapies. So addition of obinutuzumab made a difference. So obinutuzumab ibrutinib combination did a lot better compared to as simple as that. Even patients who had obinutuzumab and chlorambucil, also some patients actually had a minimal residual disease, which I don't want to elaborate in a minute, but that's the thing. And I didn't help. So rituximab, obinutuzumab and ibrutinib arm tend to have slightly more side effects than this: the pneumonia, the fibrillations, the thrombocytopenias, bleeding. Resonate-2. So this was single agent ibrutinib versus chlorambucil. And it's very clear they didn't use 17p deletion arm here. And the only thing, high risk mutation is 11q. And it's very clear 11q patients tend to do ibrutinib. And estimated PFS was 79% with deletion 11q alone. Very clear. And same Resonate-2. The PFS in the patients who are unmutated IGH also, combination of ibrutinib tend to do better than patients with only chlorambucil. So chlorambucil is unmutated versus ibrutinib unmutated. So whole difference is very clear. So the 5 years PFS in unmutated with ibrutinib was 67% compared to 6% in chlorambucil. So the whole concept till now is very clear. BTK inhibitors plus or minus a CD20 antibody will make a severe difference in high risk mutations. So these are the same Resonate trial which was used in relapsed CLL, 6 years data, which still show ibrutinib and of a CD20 antibody. Probably this will not have any importance, but just to show, like as over the time, when the biggest problem when people use a BTK inhibitor in a upfront CLL, we notice like for first 1 or 2 to 3 months, probably 2-3 months, there is the initial first month at least there will be an initial leukocytosis, lymphocytosis. We see patient comes up, WBC counts are going up on ibrutinib, and subsequently that's basically because of compartmental shift like CLL, the lymphocytes coming up from the nodes and spleen and liver into the peripheral blood, and subsequently over the time they settle. This graph actually was put forward to make you show like as the time goes on, the number of partial responses actually increase, and the progressive diseases or these things actually come down. That's the specialty of using a BTK inhibitor. So over the time, the partial response increases. No much important in the complete response. You can never achieve a complete response with a BTK inhibitor alone. Probably we're adding a venetoclax, which doesn't have any data right now, or CD20 antibody in the term of obinutuzumab, not rituximab. Same Resonate data, which is showing probably it's not clear in here picture. So people with ibrutinib with IGH mutation or unmutated almost tend to do same. P53 also, there's a small gap, but still it's good enough to have a thing. Other Notch and SF3 mutation, which almost is the same. And overall survival, which probably CLL, we cannot have a difference in overall survival. So Resonance study showed us the common BTK, so ibrutinib's adverse effects. So diarrhea being common, so multiple fatigue, cough, urinary tract infections, thrombocytopenia. So many patients of say 8 to 6 patients come with the petechial rashes on ibrutinib and UTI infections. And same thing, as the time goes on, the number of side effects and their adverse effects actually come down. Infections and neutropenia being still the bigger things, but as the time goes on, they come down. Other hypertension, diarrhea, all actually settle as the time goes on. So overall the time, the prevalence of grade 3 and more adverse effects actually settle as the response also as it goes on. So what are the other drugs now? We have spoken about the BTK, first generation BTK inhibitor like ibrutinib. Now coming to other drugs which actually can be used in high-risk mutation, that's one of the drugs is venetoclax, and especially in the combination of obinutuzumab. This is the only combination right now apart from BTK inhibitor which can be used in high-risk CLL, where there can be a intermittent treatment. In the sense, you can stop somewhere 1 year or 2 years, venetoclax, obinutuzumab of 6 cycles of obinutuzumab, 6 months, and venetoclax of 1 year or 2 years. You can stop. They don't need a lifelong treatment or continuous treatment. You can have intermittent treatment. And these are the only drugs, obinutuzumab and venetoclax, where they can have a minimal residual disease. Minimal residual disease, 8 years, 7 years back, did a major difference in treatment of CLL. But with now availability of BTK, probably the MRD has gone. Minimal residual disease is going a back foot. But where we need a minimal residual, but still importance in minimal residual disease is very rarely. I think now nobody does transplants in patients with CLL who fail on chemotherapy and all, young patients, allotransplant where MRD negativity really makes fun. There, obinutuzumab and venetoclax are only drugs which actually induce minimal residuals. And as I think graph clearly shows, venetoclax, obinutuzumab, even in IGH mutation unmutated, they tend to follow the same path compared to chlorambucil thing, and T53 mutation also. Using addition of venetoclax to obinutuzumab really made difference compared to without using it. Now, Marino is one of the trials which was venetoclax and rituximab. Again, rituximab doesn't have any MRD effect. It's only obinutuzumab. And very clear, venetoclax addition actually makes sense. Venetoclax addition to rituximab showed a big difference in OS and PFS. So this is why the importance of Marino trial actually, which actually shows that venetoclax actually induced minimal residual disease. Out of 130 patients who could be assessed who had responded in the addition of venetoclax, 83 patients, that's more than 60 to 70%, so probably 60% of the patients were actually having a minimal residual disease, undetected minimal residual disease. Of these 83 patients, 58 patients who still maintain, even after we didn't follow venetoclax, were maintaining minimal residual disease. Only one patient actually progressed. And 21 patients who actually had a low MRD, MRD but lower MRD, they are actually still without any PFS event. People who had actually had 4 patients who had high MRD, one of the patients progressed. So people who had already high MRD, 11 patients had progressive disease. So that means MRD really makes a sense in the overall survival in the PFS. And people who use venetoclax, this MRD, I think an MRD is almost 50 to 60%. And as venetoclax and the data is well matched, it works everywhere, venetoclax, high risk and regular mutations. And with every drug, like probably everybody knows venetoclax, you tend to have adverse side effects more compared to patient with not using venetoclax, and infections being the fatigue and infections being the most common. Now, so now because the drug of interest acalabrutinib. So summarizing, the whole high risk CLL now has evolved totally away from regular immunochemotherapy. Now upfront, even it's not wrong, even a low risk mutation, low-risk patient who requires a treatment, symptomatic CLL who doesn't have high-risk mutation, it's not wrong to start a BTK inhibitor or non-chemoimmunotherapy drugs, single-agent ibrutinib, and ibrutinib obinutuzumab. There is no big data to compare with alone ibrutinib, but with taking obinutuzumab separately, which has MRD addition, probably should make a sense. Now coming to acalabrutinib is second generation BTK inhibitor, and the difference is it's a highly selective BTK inhibitor. The most of the drugs, the side effects of ibrutinib, adverse effects of ibrutinib, because of this multiple inhibition, TK inhibitions. But acalabrutinib tend to maintain it's very highly selective BTK inhibitor. Does not inhibit any of the SRC family kinases, and only 1.5% of kinases are inhibited, compared to 8.9 in ibrutinib. So most of the side effects, what we see ibrutinib, atrial fibrillation, anything else, any side effects, diarrhea and all, are because of its multi-tyrokinase, family kinase inhibitors, compared to acalabrutinib, which has highly selective. This is just to explain the SARS kinase inhibition, which we don't see in acalabrutinib. The IC lesser, more the IC number, lesser is inhibition, and acalabrutinib tend to have lesser or no inhibition of SARS kinase compared to ibrutinib. Now, so going into this, so it's the main trial, the Elevate trial, which actually is a phase 3 trial, which showed using upfront acalabrutinib with or without combination of obinutuzumab versus obinutuzumab chlorambucil, which has been an entity, and stratification is basically 17p in ECOG. So most of the criteria here is more than 65 years or patients who are less than 65 with poor performance score or lesser creatinine clearance being slightly low, and they require according to the regular CLL criteria. All the cytogenetics, age-wise, stage-wise, everything was matched in all three groups. I think we need not to go through. And as expected in the previous trial, all BTK inhibitors, because see again, chlorambucil and Gazyva arm is always inferior. There is nothing to prove here. Very clear. Addition of acalabrutinib did make a difference. And the 2 years PFS was 93 in Gazyva plus acalabrutinib to 87 only acalabrutinib. 47, mere 47 patients who were using chlorambucil with Gazyva. So the median PFS was not yet reached in the both acalabrutinib arm. So this actually, and even P53 mutations, acalabrutinib combination, 95% patients were having a 2-year PFS compared to 19 patients in obinutuzumab chlorambucil arm. So actually, because of Elevate trial, where you can initially see like acalabrutinib and Gazyva, acalabrutinib single agent has been slightly inferior to acalabrutinib Gazyva, so it's always approved in combination with Gazyva as in the upfront setting, but in a relapse setting, it can be used as a single agent. Then first plot is very clear. Most of the site in any age group and age group, staging, bulking of the disease, it actually favors acalabrutinib Gazyva. Basically, a poor performance score is the only thing where both can be same. And the mutation starting from 17p everywhere, it favors again acalabrutinib and Gazyva, except in mutated, IGH mutated, where again it's almost same because IGH mutation, acalabrutinib and single agent acalabrutinib is slightly as same as Gazyva chlorambucil. Now coming to the adverse event, the grade 2, definitely when used again, Gazyva and acalabrutinib arm tend to have slightly more reactions. And this thing is some reason infusion reactions when you're using acalabrutinib Gazyva was comparatively less compared to chlorambucil Gazyva. This was one thing which still I am not able to think through why. So because the infusion reactions always related to Gazyva. Same Gazyva is used here and acalabrutinib is never used before. So infusion related reactions somehow tend to be lesser in patients with acalabrutinib and Gazyva compared to addition of when Gazyva is with chloromazine. UTI, so compared to acalabrutinib, UTI, anemia, rash, these are tend to be slightly more, and pneumonic patches may become more common in the acalabrutinib. So this has a lower rates of grade 3 cardiovascular events. But atrial fibrillation is almost less than grade 3. It's only 4% compared to 8 to 9% in patients with atrial ibrutinib. Even the mere 3%. That's again mere 3% in addition to Gazyva. Hypertension, which is again low compared to ibrutinib. And you can notice like the patients on acalabrutinib exposure are almost 27.7%, and still the lesser cardiovascular adverse effect. And the low rates of discontinuation also were seen in acalabrutinib arm compared to Gazyva and chloromazine. Discontinuation was dose reduction. Discontinuation most of the times maybe because of adverse events or the loss of consent, the most of the adverse events. And ASCENT trial, same Acala combines, say in a lab setting, so combining Acala versus Idelsib or Benda, both think Acala is very clear, better than, I think there's no debate in that. And 17p deletion and P53 mutation also, Acala tend to do better than Idelsib and Bendamustine. So basically, it's already proven to have a BTK inhibitors to be things. So our whole notation is where to use Acala compared to ibrutinib. The whole notation is there. Most of the arms, is a relapse setting, most of the arms, high risk mutations and stage wise, everywhere acalabrutinib tend to do better than patients using other drugs of choice. Overall survival not change much, same thing. So atrial fibrillations are slightly higher compared to patients with ibrutinib and rituximab versus Idelsib rituximab, and hypertension as cardiovascular events tend to be higher. I think this is no point. So coming to the guidelines of CLL now with the new thing, new treatment guidelines. So first line treatment, Acala is being approved with the combination of ideally obinutuzumab plus or minus. Obinutuzumab is the upfront treatment, or ibrutinib single agent, or venetoclax with obinutuzumab. That has been a preferred agent. The chemotherapy arms have fallen back. No more recommended in the thing, or never in high risk mutation, even in a low risk mutation also. Second line, single agent Acala, ibrutinib, venetoclax, rituximab also, and probably with available combination of venetoclax, ibrutinib also should make any sense because a new trial coming into this thing, which makes actually a better deal. Concluding, so deletion 17p or P53 mutation is considered still a highest risk in CLL criteria, international CLL criteria. Deletion 11q, IGH, unmutated or elevated beta 2 micron complex, it's unmutated actually, sorry. I just probably typing mistake. And complex character, but still considered unfavorable prognostic index. And chemotherapy is not effective. Chemotherapy has minimal role in management of relapse refractory CLL. New therapies like BTK inhibitors have become a standard of treatment of choice in high-risk CLL. With now availability of two different BTK inhibitors, ibrutinib and acalabrutinib. The only difference I feel in acalabrutinib, because I have used in 2-3 patients acalabrutinib, probably not in treatment naive. So both patients were relapse refractory. The only difference is ease of taking, being a BD dose, and I haven't seen any side effects. The usual, somehow the usual thrombocytopenia, I mean, the petechial rashes we tend to see in regular ibrutinib. The patients is very less number, so we don't usually see that way common in acalabrutinib. Thank you. So.